Thank you so much for coming and spending a little bit of your Friday afternoon with us as we learn about one critical aspect of protecting lakes that we all love and care for. My name is Sam, and I am your lake biologist. This is my 5th year working for you, and I'm so happy to be a part of a community that's actively working to protect our waterways. I'm going to talk a little bit about some definitions and importance of buffer zones and why we're here today, and then you're going to hear from some local contractors. So the topic today is focusing specifically on greenbelts, also called buffer zones. These are rightly named because it quite literally buffers both your shoreline from the wind, waves, and ice damage, and it buffers the lake from nutrients and sediments from the upland. So think fertilizer, bird poop from your roof, salt from the roads, things like that. The definition of a greenbelt is simply a strip of diverse vegetation that's planted along the shoreline between the water and your lawn. So I want to go over some other definitions that kind of help us understand the layout of your property. So you've got the lake, the shoreline, the buffer, and then the upland zone. So the lake is just simply that near shore area, or it's also known as the littoral zone. So this is just where sunlight is able to hit the bottom and aquatic plants and vegetation are able to grow. The shoreline is the transition from the water to the land. So this is not an exact line. It's totally dependent on your property. It begins at the top of whatever bank you have there and then goes to the water. So sometimes it's 2 inches or sometimes it's 30 feet. The buffer zones, the one we're talking about today, this goes from the ordinary high water mark and extends about 35 feet upland. The width of that is dependent on who you're talking to. Some people say that 10 feet is good. The state recommends 50 feet. And then there's the upland zone. So this goes from the edge of the buffer all the way up. That includes your lawn and your house and your garage. So your greenbelt can look any way you simply a no-mow zone, a bed of wildflowers, or a perfectly planned and manicured row of plants. The key is that we really just want roots in the ground to stabilize your shoreline and buffer the nutrients and sediments coming from the upland. In the past 100 years or so, we've gone from having small cottages that we visited for short periods of time in the summer with heavily forested shorelines, trees all the way up to the water. And now it's more common to have large homes on clear-cut lots that are mowed right to the water's edge, allowing those excess nutrients and sediments having a direct line to the water. And unfortunately, we've learned the hard way the impact that this new way of living can have on the water. So now we just have to focus on educating each other and how we can live in balance with the lakes, both with a view of the water and having a minimal impact. So we're thinking about you passing your beloved property onto your children's children's children. One of those impacts is the effect of the added nutrients that they have on the water quality. Nutrients like phosphorus are a limiting factor in plant growth. So when a lawn that is fertilized and it's mowed directly down to the lake shore, and we get a rainstorm, all of those nutrients have an easy path right down and they'll go right in there. And this isn't even talking about how soil and how we should be feeding the soil and not the lawn. And that nature isn't meant to have a monoculture of one plant species. That's an entirely separate conversation. So once the extra nutrients are in the water, the limiting growth factor is no longer limited. So that's when we see things like algal blooms that are at best unsightly and at worst cause oxygen-free environments by blocking the sunlight and killing fish and any aquatic plants that are growing there. Another impact of the lawn to the water's edge is more easily seen and felt, and that's erosion. So roots in the ground is a common statement that you'll hear when we talk about stabilizing the shoreline. I've seen properties right here on Elk Lake that installed a seawall of large boulders, very large boulders. And in one winter's ice, almost all of those boulders were ripped out and pulled into the lake. And they did that from a recommendation from a contractor. None of them who are here today. Just to be clear. Just to be clear. And so now, unfortunately, they're having to redo their shoreline yet again and pay for it, and it's damaging. And they're working on a bioengineering the shoreline with a dense greenbelt behind it so that they can stabilize the shore with more roots. So as an example of the minimal strength that lawn holds, is grass roots are about 6 inches deep, but a plant like a black-eyed Susan, that they go about 6 feet deep. So you can imagine that 6 feet can hold a lot more than 6 inches. And there's a little one photo over here that's got some plant roots there that just gives you an idea of the difference between your lawn grass being able to hold 6 inches and other plants holding a lot more. So when our shorelines are buffered with dense root systems, we stand a chance against Mother Nature because we're working with it and not against it. We're not going to win against nature, so we have to figure out how to work in tandem. We completely understand that you live on the lake and you want to enjoy it, both in the water, sitting on the shoreline, and viewing it from your home. If you have young grandkids who want a beach, and we are not here to tell you no, but let's find a way to position the beach sand so that you have a buffer between the sand and the lake, so that way when it rains, the sediment isn't going directly into the lake or the beach sand. We want you to have entrances for your kids and dogs to play and pull your kayak out. And we know that the trees can block the view from your kitchen sink, so let's just prune them in a way to filter your view instead of cutting all of the trees down. We want to work with you in how you utilize and want to use your property. A shoreline greenbelt that will provide the most water quality benefits will cover about 75% of your shoreline and extend upland at least 10 feet, but ideally more. So if you have 100 feet of frontage, 75 feet ideally would be covered in some sort of buffer zone. I know that that sounds like a lot, but there are so many plant options out there that are low growing or shrubby so that you can still access your shore and you don't have to be looking at a wall of vegetation and not the shore or not the lake. So one of the ways is the filtered view through your trees. So tree roots are going to be bigger, deeper, and stronger at holding your shoreline in place. So I'm a huge advocate for keeping as many trees on your shoreline as you can. And there are companies that will work with you on pruning your trees to cut selective branches, which encourages the growth upward. If you have young trees, fir trees, then you can just prune them. And also, I can't turn this way without the microphone. There's a before and after there of an example of some trees, so that the tree is still there with the branches. You have a better view of the lake. Another option, just with trees as an example, is to provide a window view down. So you have like a pathway down to the lake with no trees, and then you would just filter the branches on the other trees or prune them so that you have one clear view and then a filtered view on the other side. So it's important to remember that the lakes that we live on and love are not pools. They are living, breathing ecosystems with diverse animals and plants that they house. They're meant to swell and contract. They're meant to house a wide diversity of plants and animals. Aquatic gardens and weed beds are a sign of lake health. Snails are a sign of lake health. Ducks, fish, frogs, all of those are a good sign, but they need habitat. And this is a big issue all over the country with habitat loss of that nearshore area because cutting your lawn to the lake is common. So they play a vital role in the food chain in our ecosystem, and the lakes would not exist without all of these animals and plants. So the buffer zone helps to create habitat and keeps the water cool for them to thrive. A hot topic this time of year is geese. Geese love a lawn with no barriers between the water and the grass, and as it creates a wide open area, they can see any predators that are coming for them, and there's no plants to absorb or slow the water. So their poop that is in your lawn is going directly into the lake, and then that can then have some algal growth and possible E. coli concerns. So we don't think that you need to go spend $10,000 and implement a massive greenbelt this summer if you can't do that. If you can, great. We love that and we support that. And you will love the positive effect that that will have on the lake. Creating a plan to implement a greenbelt in stages is very common. If you plant 10 plants this summer, great. And then you do 10 more next summer, awesome. An easy first step that you could do is to implement a no-mow zone. So you just don't mow within 10 or 15 feet of the lakeshore. Native grasses and wildflowers will typically be some of the first to appear there, and those roots will go deeper than your lawn grass. And then maybe you break it down into other parts where you're having concerns with erosion or geese, and you start by implementing plants there year after year. Or you can hire someone like one of our contractors here today and have them do a full greenbelt installation. The important thing is to just get more buffer between the lake and the humans. Plants are specific to your soil, the amount of sunlight, water tolerance. We can work with trees, flowers, grasses, shrubs. There are endless options. And the last thing I just wanted to say is that ESLA offers free shoreline consultations from me to current members. So I'll come to your property and look at things with you and offer whatever advice that I can give and methods of implementation. So that is it. Does anyone have any questions? Any questions? Are we ready for our... Kyle Williams, he is with the Antrim County Conservation District. He's the soil and erosion officer. He administers and enforces the Antrim County Soil Erosion Control Program and permitting.
Hi, thank you guys. I can't tell if this is working or not. Kind of. All right. I can also just talk loud now. Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me. Too much noise on the road. All right. Well, thank you, Sam, for that great introduction. The introduction to, you know.
Well, let's get a little higher.
I gotta be closer.
There you go.
Sorry. Not used to using microphones, so I'm usually just kind of loud. So as Sam said, you know, greenbelts are a very important part of the lake ecosystem and the health of the lake overall. You know, one of the big things that we like to encourage from my department is the fact that your 100 feet or whatever you have does matter. You know, a lot of people think like, oh, I only have 50 feet. I only have 100 feet of frontage, right? What does it matter if we've got 1,500 properties around Torch Lake, what I do on my property? But if you're not taking care of your 100 feet and your neighbor's not taking care of their 100 feet, then pretty soon we have a full lake, you know, front of nothing but green grass and fertilized lawns. So it's really important to do any little bit that you can. Like Sam said, you know, 10 plants this year, 10 next year, whatever. Do a little plot and start from there and expand out if that's all you can manage. But anyway, you know, the next couple people are going to really kind of talk about the plantings and the design and that kind of thing. So basically what I want to talk about with you guys today is what my program is and what I do for the county. I work for the Conservation District, but I manage the county's soil erosion and sedimentation control program. So basically what that is, Antrim County regulates any earthwork construction within the 500 feet from the water's edge. So all your shoreline stabilization projects, any new constructions, any additions, garages, whatever the case is, anything that destabilizes the soil on a property generally requires a soil erosion permit from my office, if you're within 500 feet of the lake. So one of the issues that we see a lot, we get a lot of questions about, is, you know, the people that are not happy with what their neighbor's doing on their property, as far as elevation or grade change and that kind of thing. So The issue that we have, and this kind of comes down to what you guys can manage for yourself too, is we don't really regulate elevation or grade change on a property. So the soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinance that Antrim County has regulates the soils. So it has stormwater regulation in there, but only so far as regulation during open construction. So the only way stormwater runoff, which carries the excess nutrients and the sediment into the lake, is regulated in Antrim County, is during open construction, as far as it carrying soils off the site into the lake. So we really try to encourage people to take a good look at what they're doing with their projects and to implement these green belts and other practices that help prevent the runoff from reaching the lake. Sorry, I am a little bit unprepared today. It's been a long week, hectic, really busy for my office right now. But also, I'm for some reason nervous today. I don't know.
You're doing a great job.
Snakes and frogs. Yeah. So thank you. Sam touched on it, but the buffers are a great habitat. So snakes and frogs and birds and butterflies and bees and all that, they utilize those plants. So any practice that you can implement on your property, and Sam is great for the consultations, and my office is always open for questions as well. Sorry, I'm so sorry. This isn't fair. I'm just like stand up here and now I'm blanking on everything I wanted to talk about.
Is Grand Traverse County similar to what you guys
So
doing?
thank you. That's what I wanted to get to too. My program is, as I said, strictly Antrim County, right? So every county in Michigan has a soil erosion control program. All of the regulations are similar because they branch off of what the state requires. So it's a state mandated program. Antrim County regulates the 500 feet and then anything that's over an acre in size. Grand Traverse is similar. It's the 500 feet and the acre in size because that's the state's mandated minimum requirement as far as soil erosion permitting. Grand Traverse also, I think, goes more into that because they regulate based on slope on sites and some other things. They've got some other regulations. So any questions specific to that is not with me. Grand Traverse runs their soil erosion program, I believe, out of their building and health department. And then Kalkaska is with the building department as well. So sorry, what was that? It does, yes. The 500 feet does apply to any surface water body. So whether that's a lake, river, stream, pond greater than 5 acres, or wetlands that are over 5 acres as well are considered waters of the state. So it's anything that the state counts as waters of the state. So they regulate the soil erosion program. Any construction within that 500 feet needs to have a permit. Basically with that, the soil erosion permit with my office, you come in, you apply, you fill out an application and submit it to me. And then I will go out to your property and review your proposed project and make sure that the erosion control measures that you've submitted with your application are going to be sufficient to protect your waterfront or the adjacent properties. So no soils are allowed to leave your site during open construction and impact either the waters of the state or adjacent properties. Yes. As far as interfacing with Eagle, that's Eagle and my office do interact a lot. Eagle's jurisdiction on the inland lakes and streams is generally below the ordinary high water mark. So in the water, below where the persistent vegetation stops is generally Eagle's purview on the lakes and rivers and streams. So all your shoreline stabilization projects generally require a permit from the state with Eagle, and they also require a permit from my office. We also interact with zoning a lot because almost every single township around Torch Lake is zoned. Actually, around Torch Lake, Central Lake is the only one I. So Eagle, townships, and my office, we all interact and generally overlap in our purviews. So what I like to do is recommend that homeowners, contractors go and talk to all of the required departments for their permits. Yeah. Yeah, so he's asking if we both have to issue permits. So Eagle and my soil erosion department both need to issue permits for these projects. For shorelines and projects that are within Eagle's jurisdiction, below that ordinary high water mark, they do require a permit both from my office and from Eagle as well.
Well, if you're just going to dig up some grass
Yes.
and plant some native plants, you don't need a permit, do you?
Depends. So it depends. If you're just, when you say dig up grass, are you talking just removing that vegetation, immediately planting, and completely stabilizing the soils all in, within the same day or the same project?
Am I saying that? Or, I mean, you say grass doesn't do any good anyhow, so, but now you're saying it sort of does a little something.
Well, so, any vegetation, any root mass in that soil does stabilize that soil, right?
So, if you're
So
going to plant right
native
away,
vegetations with the deeper, longer root systems stabilize better, but removing that grass is destabilizing that soil because then you will have bare earth. So again, if it's within 500 feet, generally it does require a permit. Now, that's kind of a good point. There are exceptions, exemptions, and waivers for specific projects if it's small in nature or if it's going to be stabilized immediately, like within 24 hours, and certain other projects don't require.
and the landscapers.
The landscapers generally do know that, especially ones that are here.
Yeah, okay.
But if there's questions, I'm always available for answering any of those questions. So
Thank you. Perfect. Did a good job.
thanks. So like I said, zoning, Eagle, my office, we all interact, we all kind of overlap. Soil erosion's usually the first stop. Building department is not supposed to issue a permit for any project within 500 feet unless they've got the soil erosion permit. And then zoning kind of works in tandem. They're kind of separate. But everyone has their own requirements. And buffer strips specifically is frustrating for some of them because every township has a different ordinance. So the requirements, like Sam was saying, the state recommends 50 feet, right? And then other people recommend 10, some say 30, whatever it is. But each township regulates it. So it's always a good idea to figure out what exactly the township wants also. But generally, any earthwork within that 500 feet, you're going to want to talk to people.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from David Spicer. He's got over 30 years of experience. He's restored over 4,400 feet of shoreline. He has Habitat Landscape. Is a preferred certified contractor of the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership, and staff are trained in the use of green landscaping technologies and bioengineered erosion control.
Hello. Hello. Thanks for coming out. What a turnout. Usually when we get called, it's because people have erosion problems. And we kind of specialize in high energy sites that have a lot of erosion problems. I thought that I was going to come here and we were going to be talking about bioengineering here, but it turns out we're talking more about the bio part and less about the engineering part, which is good for me because the bio part's the part when we take a job to do a shoreline, we only take jobs where we get to plant up a greenbelt. In most cases, to be honest, if you have shoreline problems, if you have erosion problems, you can get away with just engineering a seawall or, you know, some other kind of rock boulder thing, and that probably will solve your problems. But for us, that's mostly just a rock hauling job, and we don't really want to do it if we don't get to plant up. And we're most interested in planting up habitat, restoring the habitat on the shoreline, which means native plants. Almost all the time that we're doing plantings, we're planting to stabilize soils. So we like to use what we call the workhorse plants, which aren't necessarily the poster child native plants. You know, they're not necessarily the coneflowers or the butterfly weed or you know, the milkweed, stuff like that, that you see pictures of. It's more shrub willows, shrubs, grasses, native bunch grasses, things with massive root systems that are resilient to deer browsing, or the deer don't browse. Because you know, whatever you plant, if you don't have a plant, they're probably going to hammer it hard when you turn your back or go away for the winter. So, you know, with shrub willows, red twig dogwood, 9-bark, buttonbush, there's a whole bunch of shrubs you can use. Once you get them established, you can cut them back as much as you want. You should cut them back every 3 to 5 years. And you can preserve your view shed and still have that massive root system in the shoreline that will hold your soils together. Native bunch grasses, deer don't eat the grasses. They have switch grasses, little blue stem. They have root systems that are almost the equivalent of woody shrubs. So they're excellent plants to use. It's important to plant very densely. A lot of the shorelines we see where people have started to do a greenbelt to stabilize the soils, they were just too puny about it. If it failed, they just didn't do enough plantings. What Samantha said about going at it gradually is a really good idea. But plan, if you're concerned about stabilizing your soils, plan to plant densely. If you have to mitigate erosion, that's what you're going to need to do. What else can I tell? Does anybody have any questions? Are you wondering anything about?
When you said a high energy site, can you explain what that means?
Okay, high energy sites. We do a lot of work north of here. We work throughout the chain of lakes. We work as far south as Skagamog Point and as far north as Sheboygan. We're on Douglas Lake again a lot. We have a lot of sites on Douglas Lake. Those are large lakes. They have high wave energy, especially when the fetch is long. The fetch is the distance of water directly in front of your shoreline. So a fetch of a mile or more with a short run-up. The run-up is how deep the water is, how far out. So if your shoreline has really shallow water out hundreds of feet, you're going to have less wave energy than if it's very deep close to the shore. So a high energy site will have deep water close to the shore, a long fetch, and the biggest thing is the freeze thaw. Okay, so if you have a lake, it's like a glass of water that you put in the freezer. So if we're having more extreme freeze-thaw cycles now. So if the temperature changes 15, 20 degrees in the course of a night, and that ice just expands, and it can push. If you go up to Douglas Lake, there are trees that are like this big around that get pushed 10 feet right up the shoreline. Roots get ripped right out. The ice berms are this high and 6 feet wide. So there isn't really anything you're going to do. We've replaced corrugated steel seawalls up there. There isn't anything. You're not going to create enough mass to stop the ice. I mean, you might be able to. You're going to pour a lot of concrete and use a lot of steel to do that. So our bioengineering techniques we build mass with smaller stone. As Samantha was talking about, seeing how the ice pulls the boulders right out of the shoreline, pushes the boulders up the shoreline, pulls them out into the lake. We use smaller stone that can be replaced manually. In a high energy site like that, we tell people it's important. You got to realize that you're going to have to maintain this. If you have a bad winter, you need to get back out there and put the stone back. So we build it so that's possible to do manually without machines. So there's principles to the engineering, the way to set that up and build it and build mass without necessarily using giant boulders or concrete or steel or plastic for that matter. We don't use geotextile fabrics like you see so often. So that's part of the engineering part. Does anybody want to have any more questions about plants? Yes, sir.
Not exactly a question, but we have to redo we have a high energy, real gentle slope going down. It goes out quite a way, so that's the only problem.
That's a really good point. One of the principles of engineering, it doesn't have to do with plants though, is we try to achieve, when we build what we call our revetment, which is the substitute for a seawall, which I just explained, we build it out of smaller stone. A real important principle is a 4-to-1 pitch. So for every 4 feet out, it drops 1 foot. That way, when the ice comes in or when the wake boats come by and those waves come in, they break further out. The ice gets pushed up that revetment, and the stones act like ball bearings, and it deflects the energy of the ice up over the bank instead of directly into the shoreline. If you build it well, that's the idea, and it works pretty good. I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I've seen a lot of failures, and we've gone back to the drawing board several times. But plants, like we love to use native plants. I think, some people might get a little miffed at me for saying this, but almost everything you hear about native plants is not true. They don't have deeper roots than other plants. They're not less maintenance than other plants. But they do one thing that no other plants do. We're either talking about native plants or we're talking about exotic plants. If you're a gardener, there's many exotic plants that are bulletproof. You don't need to take care of them. The sedums, the nepeta, they're going to be fine. There's many exotic plants that have very deep root systems. There are almost no exotic plants that provide food for our insects and our pollinators. The only thing that can do that is native plants. So what you get out of using native plants that you won't get out of using exotic plants is a contribution to the food chain. Exotic plants do not contribute to the food chain. Okay? Pollinators can get nectar from exotic plants. We do all the gardens at the Charlevoix Public Library. We started out there doing when they first put in the rain garden. The rain garden, when we first set it, it had over 40 species of native plants in there. Right next to the rain garden is the butterfly garden. Butterfly garden has all the traditional plants that people associate with butterflies, like butterfly bush, Napidaw. We put a bunch of annuals in there every year. When people come talk to us about it, when we're working at those gardens, I refer to the butterfly garden as the coffee and donuts, and the rain garden as the real food. The rain garden with the native plants feeds the larvae. It feeds the babies. That's where the pollinators lay their eggs. That's where, you contribute to the population of our pollinators. Pollinators, most of them maybe can get adequate nectar from exotic plants, but they must have the native plants for the food for their larvae. The native plants are called the larval hosts. So I guess that's it, unless, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from Terry Bertrand. Terry owns Barker Creek Nursery and has for over 30 years. He's got extensive knowledge of plants and landscaping of our lakes, and he's done many projects on Esla waters.
Did you turn it off?
I'm like Kyle, normally I just get really loud. So I feel like I'm in karaoke and haven't had a drink yet. Okay, so Sam asked me for my intro and I just said, just tell everyone I'm Terry. I know a lot of you maybe. Thank you. Number one for being here. It's a cold day. We've all been busy. I'm exhausted. Kyle's exhausted. But we're here. And the reason we're here is because right behind us. And Gordy and I, my partner, life partner, 33 years. We've owned Barker Creek for 30 years. We were a little slice of pie at 72, and then at age 22, the bank sold me 9 acres, or at least let me, and we grew. But with that, we started realizing, for some reason, our view of Lake Skidmore kept getting better. I don't know why. Maybe I got taller or something. But we started getting really conscientious of what we did and how we did it, because we didn't want any of my lakefront homeowners calling me up from their boat saying, where the water's coming in from Barker Creek is really pretty, So we started incorporating environmental, sustainable growing since almost day one, when it wasn't even cool. And we started with the 90 acres with knowing where our water was, kind of following it for a couple of years and realizing, the good, bad, and the ugly. It used to be a village, and literally out of nowhere, we decided to build a big pond, and all of a sudden, the water fills up. Next day, we go back there, all proud to see it, the water's gone. We, out of 90 acres, picked one spot where 100 years ago they did clay, and so our water came in. It uncovered the tile from 100 years ago, and went out. We're like, cool, pioneer. So, right then, we started realizing that we really had to rethink things. So a few years back, we got certified environmentally with the MAPE, Michigan accredited environmental program. It's very important. So when I heard about this, I sat on the soil erosion board for about 5 years. And then now I sit on the Kalkaska Parks and Recreation Steering Committee, which I'll get into a little bit, because it really does apply to you guys. But I got all the rules in their handbook, and I decided, okay, we're not going to do it for 1 year. We're not going to do it for 2 years. We're going to do everything by the book, so clean and efficient, and have everyone on board, and then we're going to get certified. And they're like, why are we waiting? And I'm like, because I don't want to be just cool. I want to be effective. So in that time period, we worked with Brad Morgan from Morgan Composting. We are their oldest retail supplier and wholesaler. And Brad came to us one day with this ingenious product called Dairy Dew. We're going to solve world hunger. So, we bought into it. We had an exclusive. And I started going to every seminar and every crazy thing and learning about soil biology. I think that's what's getting missed sometimes in what we call our water watershed and runoff, and don't fertilize, and all these signs that say, you know, give a hoot, don't pollute. I forget what they say, but it's like keep it blue or something. And I just want to knock on the door and be like, did you know that if you do fertilize and use a 14-14-14 or 12-12-12, Michigan State did a test on low mission pencil. They took PVC pipe and they put it under a row of conventionally grown cherry trees. They did another pipe under organic grown cherry trees. Same orchard, just maybe a couple rows apart. I forget the details there. And they fertilized them, conventional, organic. They had a collection method at the end of each row. They lost 80% of all conventional fertilizer to groundwater. Okay, 80%. On the other, undetectable. So me as a farmer, if that's what I am, landscape designer extraordinaire and farmer, but I grew up in farming. My grandparents' parents, my uncles, and I raised Arabian horses, and my uncle said to me, they don't work, all they do is eat shit, why do you raise them? You know, they didn't waste money, you know? And I'm thinking to myself, God, if Uncle Elmer knew that he was losing 80% of his, you know, $10 and you're only getting $2 for it, that's not a good ratio. So, back then just had the compost, which is biologically living soil, right? So what happens in that is you start creating a food web. And if you go on organ composting, and I want you guys to take this and go, don't believe me, go to their website and go to some of their like YouTube things. In that, they've got a healthy, it's called Safe Green Lawn. And the Safe Green Lawn has dairy good, it has worm casting, it has trace minerals, it has Tennessee brown rock phosphate. Scary, right? It's not, it's organic. When you have an organic anything, the molecular rotation of all cells is clockwise. And of course, the plant doesn't have to do anything to fill those receptors with what it needs. But when you have a non-conventional, it has a counterclockwise. So if you have a plant that's suffering, it's not going to be able to reverse that to uptake that nutrient until it can, you know, kind of get a little healthy, improve its rotation, reverse the spin, absorb it. But a plant also has only so many cells. So, maybe this is still off course. I just did a second grade class and they were like you, kind of stoned. But anyways, with that being said, you know, if a plant's kind of injured but everything's working for it, it can absorb it, hence get healthy. Okay, it's absorbing it, what's not happening? It's not leaching. Some of us have clay, some of us have sand, but I don't care. You know, if I put oil here and washed it down the lake, yeah, from the surface it's going to go down there, but not all of it. Most of it's going to go through the soil, hit clay, and then gently make it back to the lake. What we don't want is that to happen. We want to trap it. So if I've got nitrogen, calcium, and my little plant has little cells, says I need calcium, the calcium's available in only a conventional form, it'll take it up and it'll put it in that cell thing, but it can't use it. Not right away. It's not healthy. It's not natural. But it sees this organic calcium, and now its closet's full. It can't take that organic calcium because again, its receptors, it's full. So that's the thing too, is if you've got the organics and you've got that living microbial system happening, your plants are feeding. In fact, they can eat more than children. And you're not losing that groundwater contamination. And that is ultimately what's getting out into our lake. And I don't care if you do it on the roadside of your house, because some people, it's on the roadside, the house is going to block it. No, I don't care. You build good soil biology, and no matter what you plant, it's going to do better. Less disease prone, less injury, more hardy resilience. And you're starting to create a food web in the ground that that's actually, you know, worms, your snails, all of your things that are going to feed the ducks and such. That's going to start becoming this little web of life. And that's what we've encouraged at the nursery, and that's how we educate. Liquids, granulars, they're all beneficial. But when it comes to the fertilizing, don't be scared going out at midnight with your little Osmocote and putting it in the water. I have a very high-end client, don't IDD, that likes to fertilize, and her house shows it. And the one year I said, man, why are you buying Osmocote? I mean, it's expensive, and you know, it's kind of reversing what I'm doing. You know, I said, I need to look into this. And her husband pipes up and says, well, Osmocote, Terry, makes you happy. So I went to the drawing board and I went to Brad and I said, listen, I got this lady, I'm trying to go all organic. She's nuking the lake every year. I'm like, what can I do? Of course he said stronger. But so we came up with a system where I was using liquids and just building that soil biology. I mean, making it just so rich and such a web and such a sponge that no matter what she threw at it, it would be held in that soil. It would be held in that soil. So when you hear the words like humates, it's cool. I mean, a humate is a carbon source. You're shaking your head. She's a great. He's gonna work with me one day. So how I explain it to ladies, and I can do it for guys too. I figured that one out. If you have a humate is a carbon source. You and I are all carbon sources. We're gonna get eaten by something someday. And that's what compost does. I tell the little kids, compost is a Pac-Man. Just gonna eat things. Well, what happens after you eat? Say that in front of a principal. What are you talking about? But that's also going to feed something else. So it becomes a system, right? Well, if you have all this stuff happening and maybe somebody's not absorbing it or not utilizing it, we need to hold it, don't we? We're just not going to throw it away. So if you're a girl and you've got 20 pairs of shoes or more, and you're going to go ballet, you're going to grab your ballet slippers. Now ballet's over, you're not going to throw them away. Okay, you're going to put them in your closet. And that's what humates do. So when your plant's not readily available or using it, or maybe it's struggling and it can't use it, it's not just leaching. It's being literally held. So when Brad on this on the YouTube thing, and I'm rambling, but I'll tell you, Justin, his son, who's now a daddy, just had a little girl a week ago. I'm so grateful he found a girlfriend. Took a clear, he's funny. He took a clear bottle and he put conventional fertilizer in it and shook it up, and it dissolved. Looks real pretty. But the meaning to that is it's gone. Where'd it go? Okay, it's a salt-based fertilizer. It's a conventional fertilizer. Then he takes a healthy garden, same amount, tablespoon, puts it in the thing, shakes it, and it's just suspended in this water. It's beautiful. A little sediment on the bottom, but it's there. You can see it looks like chocolate water. And the other looks like clear. You wouldn't even know the difference if you grabbed it and took a drink, other than the clear might be bitter, salty. But that's what you want to see in your soil. Is you want to have that connectivity. You want to have that right balance of mycorrhizal fungi. You want to have this internet of things of the soil that your plant can actually draw from and keep, hold on to when it doesn't need, and doesn't leach into this beautiful body of water behind me. So that's where we begin. And then of course buffer zones, shorelines, how there's a lot of impervious sidewalks. I have some clients that, honestly, I can sell all natives to, and there's some clients that I just fool. And those are the ones that I think the gardens look the best because they're beneficial for the nectar. They've got your host plants for the monarch, not only to eat, but to the larva. They're beautiful. And there's a lot of plants that don't say just the word native, they'll say native cultivar. Well, what does that mean? Well, it just means that you were walking through the woods one day and you see this really amazing bush. And all the other bushes around it were still pretty, but this one was amazing. So you take it back to your scientific lab and you patent it. And then you sell it to proven winners. And for deciduous holly, for instance, it's called Berry Poppins. And it's in a pretty little container. I thought, how can Berry Poppins be native? I mean, for God's sakes, but it's true. The guy was walking through a swamp in Minnesota. I read his backstory. It was really interesting. And found this one shrub that is unique. And he took it back to the lab, did cuttings, did some seed culture, and sure enough, all of his offspring was just that beautiful. And just like our elm trees, they'll do the same thing. Well, this one's resistant to Dutch elm disease. Why did it die? Well, let's do some investigating and let's start taking a cutting from him, putting it with him, putting it with her, and now we've got an elm tree. So, don't be misled when you see cultivar, you see a fancy pot. There's ways the industry has taken natives and they've made it sexy. I mean, literally. And then they're marketing an proven winner, and I'm charging you more. So that's how that works. But I think soil biology, I think, is key. Tie it in with everything you guys are doing. Don't shun the non-native plants. Look at the native cultivars. Sometimes they're bred to be prettier, or they're more disease resistant, more bug resistant, hardier, and have cool names. So Yeah, that's me. Anyone have any questions before
There's also a really cool documentary about soil called Kiss the Ground. Kiss the Ground. Can't recommend that enough. Learn about feeding the soil. So lastly, we have Nate with Inhabitect. He's been working within the green roof industry for over 20 years. He carries a degree in landscape architecture. Inhabitect has 3 certified natural shoreline professionals on staff, and the company is celebrating their 10-year anniversary this week.
Hello. Thanks everybody for coming. I can't believe it's May. Is this our 3rd winter meeting? So in Habitat, we do shoreline, but we also do a lot more in green infrastructure. So that's what I was asked to talk about a little bit today. We do everything upstream or uphill from the shoreline, as well as the natural shoreline. We do it in the water as well. I take it all the way back to up on the rooftop of your home or your building or and I look at the stormwater, or my team does, from that point all the way downhill as it drains towards the lake. It might be across parking lots, through various properties, so the whole watershed. We'll look at a watershed in general. But I skipped over a little bit of my credentials of who I am, I guess. I'll jump back a little bit. Nate Griswold, born and raised in Traverse City. My company's based out of Leelanau County. We cover the whole state. I have a team out of the Detroit area, as well as Leelanau County. We all travel all over the place and work. Mostly our travel work is focused on rooftop living spaces, so green roofs, but also living spaces, pavers on rooftops. I have a crew today in Detroit, working on the high rises down there, and then a crew in downtown Traverse City and one in Northport. So, we do a lot of different stuff. I did do green roofs, vegetated rooftops for 10 years of my career, full time, in Chicago. I was covering all of North America, flying all over the place and selling them. I've been a part of over 1,000 green roofs in my career. That's from everything from the World Trade Center site in New York City to the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, and many others, all the way down to my mom's woodshed. They're all different sizes and shapes, but so I took that and I came home. I was sick of flying all over the place, and I came back to Traverse City after being gone for 15 years and started in Habitat in 2013. So, and I built a great team. We have a full-time design staff, 2 people that are fully full-time designers. I manage them, as well as another designer that she helps with the design end as well as the construction. So things are growing, but here we actually planted this shoreline right here. That's one of our first ones that we did. This was a few homes that were here, and this actually is a footprint of an old cabin, I think, was here or something like that. But we did plant the stuff down here. I saw the shorelines as sort of the last stop of a train. I think of it, a stormwater treatment train is a term that I utilize in my world, and it's managing each way or each step through a landscape or a city or a community is a stop. If you think of it as a train car, so your rooftop's one car, your landscaping's another, your driveway is one, your gutter is one down, the street is another. As it moves down, each of those is a stop or a car on the train. So I deal with the stormwater as it hits the roof and moving all the way down. Green roofs, rain gardens, permeable pavements, bioswales, different types of habitat restoration all the way to your shorelines. So and we do focus on native plants. Other than, I always say 99% because with green roofs, where a lot of times we're doing sedums on rooftops. We do that because it's low irrigation requirements, but it is still creating habitat. Mike just sent me a picture today of not a piping plover, a killdeer baby, a little tiny little chick up on one of our rooftops of sedums. It's pretty cool. So there's no predators up there, so that's where they were. But yeah, so we're designing, building, and growing all kinds of green infrastructure projects across the whole state, and we're very involved in community level stuff as well. We work with municipalities and townships, and I consult on various types of things. We do full site planning projects. We're doing a cidery project in Leelanau County. It's 40 acres, right in Elmwood Township, so really close to Traverse City. Actually has a Traverse City address, but they're going to be a micro cidery. They're going to so we did everything: placement of the house, placement of the barn, placement of farmers market. It's all in the headwaters of a little creek called Cedar Creek that goes to Cedar Lake that goes into the bay. So we're helping. We helped them from envision the entire 40 acres and put it all in a drawing package, getting them land use permits for each of those things. So shoreline is one of the things we do, and we've done things on the bays, on Lake Michigan, as well as inland lakes, high energy lakes like this lake here, as well as shallower, more calm lakes. We come up with different systems and processes that have worked for us. So that's what I have. Question?
When you're asked to come out and consult with somebody on their, let's just say shoreline, what are the steps you start with, and how's that work?
So typically, we'll get a call, and we like to do a little interview on the phone first. What's your site access? Are you a part of an association? Who are your neighbors? Or is your house falling into the lake, or whatever it is? All right, so we do an interview, and then sometimes we'll ask for pictures. We cover a lot of territory, so we want to we feel it out, make sure that it's a decent, it's a potential for us and a potential for our clients, and then we'll make a stop out and do a initial site visit and give a proposal and a report what we saw, and then if that proposal is signed, we'll move to the next step of design. And once design happens, then it's permitting, and we'll handle all the permits and all that.
Any special conditions you look for? I mean, the slope or access. I mean, you said access, but what other conditions do you look for?
Well, the conditions is really, some people will consider the site. This is really scary. Cuts into that. I look for, something that is, to me, the bigger one. And for me, the job that I'm interested in is that we can get stuff down there. We've figured out ways to get there. So the access is one of the first things that I'm looking at because of the feasibility of how are we going to get it down there. I have Sundoe on the top of the bluff that I'm working on in Frankfurt. It's a 200-foot drop between where the house is to where the water level is, and we're creating all kinds of slides through putting stuff way down there because the person's paying for it. They wanted us to do it, so we told them how we're going to get it there. But I'm typically looking for wave energy. What's going on? What's the problem? Why are people calling me? Most calls are happening because there's a bunch of erosion. I'm walking, if they're seeing their site fall apart, or I lost 5 feet last year because it's lawn directly up to the lake. You know, that's what it is. Or can I, like 20 years ago, my property was way out there. Well, you should have had lawn for 20 years, is what I typically say. But, you know, so, you know, that's the type of things I'm looking for, is seeing if it would be a good relationship. You can sense that pretty quickly.
You mentioned stormwater, and I live on a road in Kalkaska that was very poorly paved until recently, when they finally did repave it. And we're finding that what used to just permeate right through the road no longer does, and it's flooding people's properties. It's big areas, so I'm not sure rain gardens are the proper thing. What kind of trees are really good for areas that intermittently get soaked?
Well, any trees and shrubs that you're going to see on your wetlands, you know, look at what's local and nearby. If the water is draining and causing problems on your property, I'd call the road commission and have them come out there. Yeah. I was going to say, if they don't call or when they don't call you back, you can, I would, you know, there's a lot of different types of things that are really love wet soils. So.
A lot of people talk about putting French drains along their property line. To me, I'm not sure that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, and you might as well plant something. I mean, it's gonna be, to put a drain under the ground is, yes, it's more of an old school way of thinking. Drain it, get it away, and put it somewhere else. It's gone. You know, that's not the truth. Like it's sort of, you know, that's. I always think of stormwater as a resource and not a waste product. So utilizing it to create something is a better use, in my opinion, on that. So I would look at wetland plants if it's really wet and soggy when it rains, and you know, maybe ephemeral type stuff that it gets wet, it can be saturated, and then it gets dry in the summertime. You know, because maybe it's not always wet there for you.
You know, I think we met here because, you know, the shoreline here was renovated 5 or 6 years ago. But you can talk about what you did with the trees and the irrigation. These trees were just smaller.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been out here. What we did is there was a lot of riprap that was put here by somebody put chunks of concrete, boulders, and old tires. We found all kinds of stuff down. So what we did is we worked with the tip of the mitt folks, and that was a grant project. And they had a lot of plants from previous projects that they brought in, and then we brought in various shrubs and other things out there. And you know, overall, it looks like some of these over here were like 2 feet tall, and they've grown a handful of feet. I don't know if they've been trimmed or not, but it looks like they're about 4 or 5 feet tall now. The trees out here, the multi-stem shrub that's out there, I believe it's a silver spirit. I forget honestly what it was. That was planted, and that's probably 3 or 4 feet tall. So there is some growth that's happening. And there is an area that was supposed to be a rain garden, but it's turned into like a standing pond that's down there. We put a lot of things around there, and not down there lately. But you know, overall, it's looking pretty good. But it does look like some of the shrubs. I do notice that some of the shrubs have gotten pulled that might have not survived. And I'm not sure if that's because of the shock from the winter or.
Did you have to blow the photo on the slope for the ice to walk up?
No, we didn't do anything with. We didn't get a permit with it. We didn't need the EGO permit for this. We did get a soil erosion control permit, but because there's already riprap all along it, we weren't working in the water.
I got you. Okay.
We were up from that. Anything else?
that is all we have. So we're going to hang out for a little bit. If anyone has any other questions for us, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.